Okay, and welcome back to Zoink TV. I'm Andrew Weir, and this is a hard surface modelling tutorial in Blender 2.72. And in this video I've got a few examples set up of some basic and more advanced hard surface models. And if you're not sure what hard surface modelling is, it's the most basic three examples on the screen here. Basically it's anything that isn't organic, which might not necessarily be true, but it's the opposite to, or it's the other option to sculpting. So sculpting would mean I would sculpt a character in ZBrush or Mudbox, or sculpt a texture or a tree or whatever, but in this we're just doing models, and most examples will be guns or vehicles or power generators or anything like man-made. So it's pretty much the process, and I'm going to go through some of the more advanced ways that it can be made. So the three examples here show a box, and obviously it's not a normal box because it's got these slightly round edges. So we're creating a higher quality box than just the standard, which if I add to the scene, then we can see it's got hard edges. So the way that we're going to make these is very high poly, and it can be baked down into low poly, which I've got a video of how to change these kind of objects into low poly. I'll put the link in the description. And basically I'm just going to run you through some ways that these are made. So we've got the basic box, but I've got a subdivision surface modifier on it, and that's what this one looks like. Apart from I've added these edge loops in the middle here. So literally to create this I have just put a cube in the scene, added the subdivision surface modifier, which we'll see the result of that. Turns it into a sphere, and then if we add two ring loops and turn up the subdivisions, we get the same result that's right there, apart from we've got to add them on all angles. I've missed this one. So now we've got the same result, and these two here are exactly the same. But that's not exactly what you might want out of the cube. So we've got to use these extra edge loops that we've added in and try and get something similar to this box here. These boxes are called these edge loops are called constraining loops, and I'm going to move it up and going to constrain the edge to make the edges more sharp. We're not going totally to the edge because that will make it completely sharp and then there's no point. I'm just moving them towards the edge. An easier way of doing this might be to select two at once and scale them on the in this case the y-axis, and then bring them out, and it'll bring them evenly towards the edge. So now we've got this box, which we can see is the same there. And then we've got some more advanced stuff like half smooth and half straight edges. So this, in a very basic way, could be made by grabbing these ones here. I've got in wireframe there because I want to grab all of them from the back there. And then moving this down, so then we've got a sharp edge there because it's constrained, and then doing the same, grabbing all of these vertices here and pulling them out as well, and we get a pretty similar result, but I think you'll notice it's not the exact same result as what I've got here. And the reason for that is that I've spent a little bit more time. So this is the most basic example, apart from obviously you're still going to want your low poly to kind of follow the same shape as the high poly. So we can maybe grab these four and press Control Control B to bevel or chamfer the edge, and now we've got something a little bit similar to what I've done here. But if you spend a little bit more time and you sort out the edges so that the edge flow isn't messed up like it is now, we can scale this on the z-axis to 0, add in another ring loop here as well, scale that on the y-axis by 0, and keep the constraining loops this close to the edge, and we're going to want to bring it around here as well. So sometimes I've actually mirrored it on my example here, but I might have created it a little bit differently, but we're going to want to join this with J and then cut this more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut with K, and eventually we'll get the, sorry, I keep taking J instead of K, eventually we'll get the right result. And then for these last three, I'm just going to hit J and have them join that last part there. And then I'm just doing this by eye, but the way I'll tell you how I created the actual one in a second, because it's much neater than this. I'm just doing it this way for this tutorial, and that's kept the edge nice and constrained around the corner. So the actual way that I did it here is maybe a little bit more neat, and I created this part first, and then I started filling in this face and extruded it inwards to create these extra constraining loops here, and then I filled that in because it's a flat face. So I don't expect you to pick it up right away, but I've got more examples and we're slowly going to get more and more advanced, but I took a good 2 or 3 attempts to make that shape as neat as it is, and even the way that I just made it then was different to how I've actually made it, because in these hard surface models you'll want to avoid triangles as much as you can. Depending on the situation, there might be some specific ones that include triangles, but keep to polys and the mesh should be alright. But we'll see examples of that later on. So second, I'm going to look at that, and we've got cylinders. So when I add a cylinder into the scene, it might have an end on top. So if I show you this one, it's got an end on there, which is a face that's not got any information out of polys. It's just there, and it's just filled in, and no game engine or anything like that is going to be able to understand that face. So in the hard surface model anyway, when we subdivide this, it turns out not very smooth, and even when I add the constraining loops on the top and bottom, it still doesn't turn out very good. So one way around that would be to select this face, extrude it, and then scale it, and now it's kind of fixed, but it's not technically fixed because we've still got an end on there. So with the same example, we could have triangles, a triangle fan lid of the cylinder, but that, when we don't add the constraining loops, turns out like this, which is a little bit better than the previous result, which is over there, but it's still not what I would say is right. And I've got the final example here, which is how I'd say it should be made. And basically, I deleted the lid, extruded this extra edge loop in, this one here, and then the lid here can be filled in quite easily. If I delete the faces now, what we can do is we can grab these two loops here, press F to fill in the face, but I assume you know how to do some basic modelling, and then fill in these four here. I'm just going to count the vertices here to make sure I've got this right, because I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I've got 4 here. So what I'm going to do is delete that. Delete that edge. I'm going to fill in the edge here instead. And that means that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 on each side. So I'm not sure if that's totally, I think that should, but I'm just making sure that the grid fill is definitely going to work, because now we press Ctrl F and press grid fill, and it's filled in the face with polygons, and that looks pretty nice for the end result you might want. So second example, going back to cubes, is the kind of shapes that have other shapes coming off it or going into it. And I've spent a lot of time on trying to work out how to make these as well, especially this one. These ones are fairly easy, but this one here, I made it once, I failed, and I made it again. So I haven't just done these in one go. And we'll look at this basic one here. And if you did have two objects, you wouldn't want to model them together, you'd want to model them separately. But in this case, this is technically one object. So the way that we've made it is the same constraining loops that we had before. So we've got all these ones constraining the edges of the cube, and then we've added some extra ones which cover the, if I hide this, which cover the ends of this cube here. So that means that they meet at the corners of this cube, and then we've extruded it upwards, and then just done the same loops to constrain it as we did with this bigger cube that it's connected to. So and then we've added in these extra ones on the outside to keep it close. So if I got rid of these ones right here and I delete these edge loops, then it's not very, it's not exactly how I'd want it to be. But if I bring them back, it's pushing this edge in so that it's not. If I redo, so it's not spread out like this. So I've got a lot of examples, so I'm going through them quite quickly, but hopefully you'll be able to pick it up. And this one, I'm going to look a little bit longer at this one because it's got a fairly round edge, maybe not perfectly round, on top of this cube, which can be one of the more confusing situations of hard surface modelling, because when you're modelling a circular or smoother area like that on the top, you'll want to keep these loops and not mess with them. Like if I move this one just a little bit if I press G twice and move it down, then we kind of destroyed the smoothness that we had before. So it's best to use kind of a reference behind your model, or just put a cylinder or a circle or a sphere behind the model and then try and match this top edge, these edges here, try and match them to the circle and the edge of the circle, and that'll make it perfectly smooth. And if we try and add any constraining edges, for instance on the side here, then we're most likely going to mess up this shape. So if I add another one here, it's not very noticeable, but when we get to the other examples it'll become more noticeable. But it'll mess up this smooth shape, so you can't mess with it. You've got to keep it pretty much how it is, which sometimes means that it has to be higher poly than you might like. So third example kind of looks a bit like a chair, but I wasn't thinking about it when I made it. It's a little bit more complex. I'm just going into the edit mode of each one because you can at least work it out and look at the edge flow. But if we look at this edge flow, we've had to create this inner area, this part that goes inside the shape, and it's pretty much the same as extruding outwards, apart from if we did extrude inwards we wouldn't get this perfectly in line kind of straight lines down here, because it would have to be scaled in. So the way that I made this one was deleting, or having all the inside of this. Just try and find the best way to select it. Everything on the inner side of this I would have had deleted. So I've modelled the outside just how you might expect, and then I've ended up with this kind of shape. And we need to keep the constraining loops, but we can't ruin the edge flow. So if I select all the edges around the side here and I extrude it, I can't scale it on the z-axis to create this one, because I'd have to scale it all separately, and that kind of creates this kind of effect, which definitely isn't what I wanted when I was making it. And it keeps the edge flow going the wrong way as well, because we need different ones going. We don't want it all going into one point. We want it back how it was before. So the way that I made this was basically, it takes quite a while, but I decided that the way I was going to make it was extruding the walls down. So I'll keep an edge there and extrude that on the z-axis, and I'll view it in side view, keep it roughly in line, but we can always scale them in line later on if they're not. And I'm going to need to have this one be in line with those coming across the side here, and then I can fill in this face here and that one, and then, no, not that one yet. We can add I've got to add a ring loop here to keep it consistent with the lower part here. And then I'm going to add in ring loops and bring them as close as possible to, like, it doesn't matter, just like bring them within a really close range of where I want them to be. And then I'm going to select the whole thing and press remove doubles on the space bar search tab, and at the moment it's set too high because it's connecting vertices I don't want, but because they're within such a close range it's going to remove the two vertices here because they were so close together by eye that it's just connected them. So now I can select that and it's all one edge, and then I just carried on like that. So that it might seem a bit messy, there could be some better ways, but that's the way I decided to do it. And just make sure you get all the constraining loops in there. So on to more examples. This one's fairly basic. I'll go through the whole process of this one because it's got some useful tools. And basically, if I turn off this, that's all it is in, and it's really easy to make this one, but it's quite a specific kind of thing. I haven't got a constraining loop here either. And what I've done here is I've added a plane. We'll add the constraining loops to that. If we add two ring loops, scale it on the y-axis, and two more for here, scale on the x-axis, and then put two here, then put 3 in the middle because we want a center point. And the reason we want center point is we're going to use a tool that isn't set on by default. You're going to have to go into your user preferences and search in the add-ons, search loop, and you'll get mesh loop tools. And then from there we can press W. And I've got a tutorial on this if you want to find it on my channel where I go through the different loop tools. But we're going to use circle, and now we can see it's made a circle here. We can change the radius of it in case, we want a bigger circle. And I've deleted that vertex. And then we can select this entire edge on the inside with Alt right click, extrude, right click so we don't move anywhere, scale it inwards, creating a constraining loop that goes around the edge. And then I'm going to select all these sides and extrude that down just a little bit, which gives us the constraining edge there. Extrude it down again, extrude it down again for the other constraining edge, and then use grid fill again. So just to make sure it works, I'm going to select these and fill them in, and then I'm going to select this end and this end, press Ctrl F and use grid fill, which should have worked if I haven't selected the wrong edges anywhere. I think that's how I did it before. Oh yeah, we've got more information on the side here. So add in an extra loop here. And now grid fill should work, which speeds up the process. So that's that created. So now if I subdivide it, it turns out to be fine. And I'll put it in smooth shading as well, so it turns out alright. On to the next example, which is really basic. We're looking at two spheres which kind of look the same. You might notice this one, it looks a bit off because of the lighting. The lighting seems to be becoming less round than this one. but that's because the way this one's made it, and this one's made fine, but I find it just to be a little bit harder to edit, and we're not going to be, if we're not doing anything else with this, it is essentially fine. But if we zoom right into the top, we can see how we've got a point there on the light and these lines coming off it, which is the same as the cylinders. We've got that kind of thing going on, but it's not as noticeable. And the way that we got rid of it on this one is actually, instead of it starting off as a sphere, we started off with a cube, and that isn't the best way, because we can't make a cube into a low poly sphere. But if I take the subdivisions down, well, without subdividing, that is, I mean, when I subdivide it, I've got a low poly sphere which is made out of polygons. So I can apply this as the basic shape and create my sphere from that. But again, if I added in any more ring loops, they would start acting as constraining loops, and when I subdivide it, it's not going to give me a perfect sphere anymore. It's ruined it, which, depending on obviously if you want that result or not, isn't very good. So put that back to smooth shading, and now we're on the final examples, which is based off the same thing, but we've got a plane here which has had this area that's selected extruded inwards, creating a point in the top, and we don't want this point because of what we just talked about. It's going to create a point in the middle, which isn't very visible at the moment, so it looks fine, but I'd say we can start to see, and it might be visible in other software more than it is in Blender, but the way that this one's modelled, which looks pretty much the same, is similar to the top of that sphere that we can see on this layer. So this one without the edge, we want to model it out of polygons rather than triangles at the top. So I hope all that made sense. I tried to go through it fairly quickly, and we've gone through all my examples within half an hour. If you've got any questions as I went through and explaining it quite quickly, as I say, I'd suggest just re-watching it and looking at the, not really listening to what I say, but trying to replicate what the examples are made. So try and make the same example as I've shown, and that should be pretty good practice. So I thank you for sticking out the whole half an hour of the video, and if you want to see more hard surface modelling in the future, then you can, I'll just put it in the comments, give me a like, and I will get round to it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.